Hello everyone, and this is going to be probably one of the strangest lessons that you have ever seen. This is actually an update that you're listening to right now before the lesson begins. I want to let you know that you need to make sure that you watch the very end of this lesson because we do run into a bug that gets fixed and we do come back on camera instead of just sweeping it under the rug. I want to make sure that you guys get to it, and it's a simple problem with the number of characters that are allowed in a 3ds Max file. And that's all I'll say. So just make sure you catch the end of it. And with that, here comes the real lesson. Hello, everyone. And in this section right here, we're going to be taking a look at how we can create an exporter from inside of 3ds Max using MAXScript. I'm sitting here with the lovely Angela. Hello, Angela.
Hello.
And Mr. Jayhawk.
Yep.
And I will call Mr. Yep Man Logan from time to time, too. He kind of goes by both names. So, we've got Logan with us today because Logan and I work closely on a ton of different coding assignments, and when it comes to programming, you'll usually find the two of us hanging out together one way or the other. And with Angela, we're bringing her into the whole mix because she's going to kind of act as our barometer. She's going to tell us how the weather's going, if you will. In other words, is it real stormy? Does she have no clue about what we're talking about? Or is it clear skies and everything's a piece of cake? So in other words, as I'm typing things, Logan's going to be looking at her. If she looks like she's dying, Logan's going to hit me in the arms, and I'll look at her to make sure how bad she's dying. Is it real bad or not that bad? And then I'll re-explain the section that just gave her the near heart attack look on her face.
Okay.
So that's kind of the way we're going. Now, the whole idea at this point, after we've got our weapon animated, is to take a bunch of snapshots of our weapon and export those snapshots out to a 3ds Max file. Right, Logan?
Right.
And so the 3ds Max file is just going to contain, we're going to have several 3ds Max files with the way that we're approaching this, right?
Right.
One for each of our animation cycles. And inside one of those 3ds Max files, let's say we're doing fire. So let's cruise on over here to 50. So basically we'd have this animation cycle right here being stored in the fire.3ds Max file, if we wanted to call it that. Now, it's not actual animation that's being stored in that file, is it?
Right. It's actually an individual object for each frame of animation.
Aha. Now, so in other words, let's pretend that this is all one object, and it's not. Of course, we've got the deflector shields as single objects, and we're going to get into that issue here in a few minutes. But what you're saying is basically we would have something like this, and then we'd have maybe another copy of the same object, but in this position, another copy with it in maybe this position. So basically we'd have, our frames would be made up of, it's not something about time, it's more about just different objects.
Right.
And this means that we're going to have to probably follow some sort of naming convention because our converter that we're going to introduce everybody to shortly is going to need to know how or what order all of these different objects need to be played in.
Right.
Okay? Okay, you're saying right a little bit too much over there. Anything extra you want to add?
Not really.
I was waiting for you to go, nope. Okay, so since you don't have anything extra to add, let's see. What else can I blab about for a second? Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the problem, and let me demonstrate it a little bit. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. The problem we have right now is, I'll start this off in kind of a unique way. I'll start a box, because I like boxes. And I will add, let's turn on edge faces, and that looks pretty good to me. And let's go ahead and come all the way back over here to frame 0, and I'm going to come over here and convert this thing to an editable poly, switch vertex mode, and let's kind of come up from the top. I'm going to turn auto key on, move ahead 20 keys, grab this guy, move him forward, turn auto key off. You could pretend that this is an ultra cool gun for someone who has been playing with Unreal Tournament mod development for about 2 minutes. Okay?
That would be me.
And this would be Angela's gun. Call it the shovel gun. And you can see when it fires, it goes tink, tink. That's its little firing mechanism. But notice the important thing is the way I went about animating this is I animated the object at its sub-object level. Right, Logan?
Right.
And the problem we've got with our gun is we didn't do that, did we?
No, it's a separate object.
It's a separate object. So I wanted to demonstrate real quick how you could actually animate an object at the sub-object level. It's still a single object. So at this point, if I was to take snapshots at different frames, in other words, I've got one here at 0. So let's go ahead just to demonstrate this. I'm going to come up to Tools. I'm going to do a snapshot. Actually, you know what? Let's just do a range. I'm going to say, starting at 0, go to 20, and I want 10 copies. It's kind of cool to actually show this right here because this is what we're going to be writing in a sense.
Very close.
And so let's just go ahead and the clone method is going to be to a mesh. Let's go ahead and tell it OK. And boom, 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 boom. It's made it. And if we come over here and select by name, you can see that we've got box 02, 03, 04, 05, etc. The problem we have at the moment is this really isn't ready for exporting out because the naming is wrong. We don't have a box 01 in there. Unless I'm blind and just not seeing it. Which
no, it's not there.
It's just not there. But we do have, these are all starting like right here. If I was to move them over, they are all the animation at different points in time. So this is what we're talking about. Basically, when you get into Unreal, you've got all these guys, and Unreal is going to come in here and play one, the next, the next, the next. Now, it gets a little bit more involved when you get an Unreal Tournament because it does actually, there's timing involved, there's in-betweening that's going on, and all that good stuff.
Right, but you can adjust that afterwards. You
Exactly.
can actually adjust the speed and not necessarily limit to how many frames you have.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and take a look at our gun, because this, using vertex animation, worked just fine. So let's go ahead and select all these objects and delete them. Now let's come back over here to our weapon. What I want to do is we're going to leave the original alone. Can't talk here. And let's shift duplicate the entire thing over. Okay, so I'll move it over as a copy. And you'll see, of course, it still has its animation on it. And let's come over here to the fire area. And the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to attach this guy all back together. I'm going to go ahead and hit F4 to turn edge faces off just to get rid of all those lines that are all over the place. So it needs to be a single object. It can't be all of these different objects. So, and you see, there's our animation. So let's see what happens when I attach it as a single object. I select what I'm going to call my master object, and I'm going to attach everybody else to him. So attach, and you'll see my mouse up here is just a regular pointer. When I come over, it's a crosshair. So click, 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 and click. Now I no longer get a crosshair. It's now turned back into a regular pointer. I can come over here and I can turn attach off. And if I check my animation out, it still looks good, wouldn't you say, Angie?
Yeah. Where's the animation? Hold on.
No, the animation's right there. It's moving. You see the gun moving?
I was waiting for it to spin.
You got to talk into the mic so they can actually hear you.
No, I was waiting for it to spin. Okay.
No, this is all we're looking at is just the fire sequence right here. Okay, so remember, mic.
Okay.
So go ahead. So it looks like everything's cool at this point. If I wanted to do snapshots, I could go ahead and come up here and say, let's do snapshots again. Let's do a range and go from, say, 50 to 60. And since it's only 10 frames, let's only do 5 copies. And I'll tell it OK. Look at that. So we have our fire going on. Logan, does this look like this would be pretty good for exporting?
Yeah, other than the naming, that should work fine.
Other than the naming, which is definitely a problem. Whoa, wait a minute.
Wow, actually, yeah.
I got a gun 01 this time.
Yeah, it's very specific about the naming. The sequence has to start with an object named whatever 01, box 01, gun 01.
And by the way, gun 01 is actually the name that I was given when I duplicated the guy back over here. But anyways, so moving forward, so this is actually good to go. It has all of the different frames for the animation in it. Okay, I can actually delete the very first guy by hitting the delete key. And this right here would be read and played back properly. So far, so good. So at this point, you should be thinking, well, Buzz, man, why do you want me to go in there and have to write all this funky code stuff for exporting out? Because so far what you're showing me works great. Well, yeah, for the fire, but now let's back up somewhere back here between frame 0 and frame 20. And back in this area, if you remember, between 0 and 20, this animation back here is our spin up. Look at the body of the gun. It's just sitting still, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the rest of it has got some motion on it. Let's see what happens if we try to do some of this. I'll select this guy, hold shift, move him over, make him as a copy. Okay. Now, still has the animation, still opens, everything's completely cool, but I have to attach all of my objects together. So we'll go through the same process. I'll go ahead and select my base, and then come down here, click attach, and click, 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 and click. Okay, so good. Right click to turn off attach. Now, watch carefully as I spin this up. Logan, would you say we have a problem?
No animation.
There's no animation. Why is there no animation?
Because it's one object now, and it got all the animation from that base object, the first one you picked.
Bingo! That's exactly what I wanted to hear. As you'll hear me call this the master object from time to time, only because it's the object that I attached everybody to. That's why these guys, as Logan just said, inherited its animation. Well, it had none. It just sat there. So they're just sitting there. To prove this theory, I should be able to delete him, grab this guy, hold Shift, and duplicate him over again. And now what I want to do is I want to start with, actually, you know what? Let's start with him.
Okay. That should be interesting.
It should be fun. Now I'm going to say attach. So my master object is the barrel that goes through a spin-up process. And I'm going to attach this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Okay, so all is good. What is your guess that's going to happen when I drag the time slider?
A lot of stuff is going to be spinning.
So now that I drag the time slider, you can see that my gun goes through a spin-up, fire. Look at that, though. The fire process is still right. Select is still right, and put up is still right. The reason that fire looked right from the very beginning and the select and the down also looked right is because all of these objects have their pivot point at the exact same place. If you remember, we did that earlier in the animation section. What that means is when this piece back here actually inherited animation from, let's say, the deflector shield, or from the barrel in this case, the barrel's animation was the exact same.
Yeah, it matched.
It matched, and that's why it looks the same. But right now, if we came in here and we started exporting pieces out, I'll tell you what. If I was in the middle of playing the game and hit, let's go ahead and go to an Unreal type view. There we go. And I hit Alt-Fire, and my gun did that right there. I would, well, actually, I'd probably say that's pretty cool, but that probably wouldn't be very effective. So what we need to do is we need to come in here and write a script that's going to do the following process. Let me demonstrate it to you first by hand. I'm going to select all these objects again. I know this gets kind of boring, all this selecting and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to move this object over, make it a copy. This is copy number 1. I'll come over here, select just one guy. Again, I'll do an attach. I know it's getting boring watching the attacks, but it's very critical that you understand what's going on. Then if I wanted to, I could simply come down here, marquee select, and kill the animation. I'm going to come back over here, select the entire weapon again, except this time let's move to where perhaps it's all the way apart. Shift, click, drag, and let's move him over to about right there. Again, I'm going to marquee, select, and drag, but you got to be careful. I need to come back here, and if we have anybody in between, it's interpolating to this other point. That's the problem we have. That's okay. Let's just leave it the way it is, though. So we've got this. If I come over here, actually, you know what? Determination drives me crazy. Select the entire thing, delete, and he has nobody to interpolate to. Duh. Now I'm going to come back over here, grab the entire gun again, except let's move to a later frame in time. So let's just go to right here so the whole thing's open. And shift copy this guy all the way over. And then again, select everything and grab this guy as well and delete. So now I could go in here and attach all of these pieces together, and I have created my own sequence, right?
Right.
So what I'm going to need to do is write a program that's going to act kind of like the little snapshot utility right here. It's going to allow me to say from, to, how many copies I want, and that's all. And then it's going to take care of the rest for me. It will basically say, okay, well, we're going to figure out how many copies and from what range, so that's going to be where we're going to put our time slider, those different areas, and we'll take basically snapshots. Then it's going to go in here and it's going to copy all of the objects over. Then it needs to attach all of the objects together. And then after attaching all of the objects together, then it's ready for exporting. And then it's going to move to the next frame that's in the sequence, copy the original ones again, move them, or actually it won't physically move them. It'll just copy them, attach all the elements, and then again move the time slider, copy them, attach all the elements. Does that make sense?
Right, so you have a single object that has the combined animation of these separate pieces by going to each frame and then just grabbing that one frame of animation and isolating it.
You got it. So to make things more interesting, let's show you the script. So let's delete all that stuff out. Come in here, move our little guy back. For scripting, for those of you that have never done MAXScript before, please try to bear with me. This is why Angela's sitting here, just to make sure everything's cool. Isn't that right?
Oh, yeah.
So far, everything's starting to make sense a little bit?
Yeah, actually it is.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
Good deal. So for MAXScript, I need to switch over here to my utility panel. I'm going to come down to MAXScript, and then from my MAXScript rollout, you'll be writing your own rollout in just a minute, I will come down here and open a script. And then from in here, by default, it puts you inside 3ds Max, in my case 3ds Max 5, up under the scripts folder. I am going to change my location down to lesson, where we've been working with everything, lesson files. And from there, let's come down to 3ds Max, and let's go into scripts. Okay, there's my utexporter.ms. It's a MAXScript file. Let's go ahead and open it. And this is the code that I will be writing before your very eyes today. So as you see, there's all sorts of interesting, complicated stuff in it that's all very, very easy, actually. So to run this little program so that we can actually see it in action, I'm going to come up here and do File, Evaluate All. Okay, so now we have evaluated it. This is what our little program is going to look like. If you think about it, it kind of looks like our little snapshot. Yeah, except for it doesn't allow us to select poly or mesh, or who cares? We know exactly the format that we want to export the files out to, so there's no reason to have these extra selections. This utility is being written with a very specific purpose. Okay, now, we have also got, there's some unique things set in here, such as, first of all, we've got some error trapping in here. In case you were to give this file to a friend of yours and say, check it out, look what I wrote, it's really cool, and they go, I just opened it, let's see, I'm going to animate, let's just go ahead and I want to go from frame 0 to 20 and export. Well, right now it says there's an error in selection. You must have a minimum of 2 objects selected. So even if I came in here and selected 1 object and said export, it's still going to pretty much call you a dummy and tell you to reselect. Well, it doesn't actually call you a dummy, but you're going to see where you could put that in if you want. So we'll go ahead and say OK. So now let's pretend that we've selected enough things. We'll just select the whole gun so it's proper. Then you just get so happy and carried away that you forget to set your start, end, or copies, and you just hit export. There's a problem with your start, end, or copies number. That's still a problem. So you're like, oh, so now you're getting frustrated because you're in a hurry and you're happy and all this good stuff. So you come in here and even if we were to do this right here, we obviously still, in this case, we cannot create more copies than the number of frame range. Oh, wow, that's interesting. We need to reverse 2 of our error checking in there. I never intended for anyone to put a start number higher than end, but it did catch you. It didn't let you try to do anything. But if I came in here and said, give me start from 0, go to frame 3, and give me 0 copies, then again, I still get a problem with my start, end, or copies number. So now let's go ahead and say, well, I want to come in here from 0 to 20, which is what we're going to do, and I want to make 25 copies. Export. Well, you cannot create more copies than your selected frame range because it just don't work that way. So we'll go ahead and say OK, and now let's make the real thing work. Number of copies. I want to do 10. Logan, generally, do you do an actual snapshot for every single frame in your animation?
No, it's not necessary. The Unreal will actually, it's called tweening in or UScript speak or whatever. But it's where the engine, if you had only 2 frames and you wanted to, the engine would actually play that smoothly. It would interpolate between those frames. The problem, which you do want more than just 2 frames because you want control of how the animation flows because it's only going to interpolate linearly. I can't talk either.
That's okay.
But you want just enough frames to define the exact motion you want, and then let Unreal catch everything else in between.
Exactly. So in this case, it's better not to have tons of frames in there. We're just going to
save memory.
So exactly. So we'll just go from 0 to 20, and we'll grab basically every other one. So with everything selected, my start, end, and number of copies set up right, let's hit export and watch what it does. You'll notice that my time slider moved. If you didn't, you can now rewind because you're watching a video. But my time slider moved, and I now have several objects that were duplicated. Without touching anything, I'm going to come up here to my Select by Name, and all of my original objects were selected. Look at this. I now have new objects, 01, 02, 03, 04, in the proper order in which they need to be played. Let us go ahead and invert our selection, select those, delete them, and what I want to do is go ahead and move our time slider back, though we don't have to, of course, because the little window here is going to take care of it for us. Now I'm going to do a smaller number, and I want to actually show you what these look like. So 0 to 20, I only want 5 copies. I'm going to select everything so it doesn't call me a dummy. Hit export, it goes through, come back up here to select by name, invert my selection, so there's my 5 copies. I'm going to select these guys, move them over to the side because I want you to actually see what we're looking at. So let's start right there. So I'm just going to kind of back away and over. So let's come over here and grab Mr. Number 5 first, move him away. Let's grab 4, move him over there. Let's grab 3. Move him over there. And let's grab 2. And move Mr. 2 over there. Now, our little exporter right here did the best it could to go through here and evenly space out between frames 0 and 20 and take snapshots appropriately so that we'd have 5 of them that were evenly spaced throughout the animation. Okay? So we start right here. Very first frame. Our barrel's up at the top. Everything's together. You'll notice on the second frame, or the second object that would be considered a frame, our barrel has started to turn. It is no longer straight up where this one was. And also our deflector shields are starting to pull out. Over here by the third frame, our barrel has turned even further. We're almost at a 45 between the two. And our deflector shields further apart. Over here, now they're going into an open position. And our animation is almost complete as far as the barrel is concerned. And over here, it is complete. Okay? So right there is kind of a sequence. And check this out. Individual, individual, individual. Starting to sound like a robot. It's individual objects. It's not a bunch of pieces. So at this point, we would be ready to actually export these guys out. Of course, not with moving them all around the screen like this. You would leave them in place. But let's go ahead and come back in here. So let's take a look. Let's undo and not delete the master gun. That was retarded. Boy, my IQ's pushing 1.5 today. All right, so there we go. Everything's cool. Select it. Look in here. It's all our original objects. By the way, our original object, remember it was called gun earlier, and then object 1, 2, 3? They've all been renamed. Master object 1Z00, master object 2, 3, 4, all zeros. Keep that in mind because we're actually going to be renaming things a little bit later on. So let's go ahead with everything selected. Now let's do the real deal. This is how it would all go about happening. 0 to 20. I want to do 10 copies. Export them. Boom, there's my exportation. Exportation. I'm thinking export, and I don't know where the shun come from. Okay, so we're going to export. Come up here to select by name. We still have our original object selected. Let's invert that selection so there's our correct object selected. Let us select that. Come up to File, and then come down to Export, Select it. Okay, because we don't want to export everything in the scene. We want to export what is selected at the moment. So we'll come in here. They're all named properly. And I could call this SP up for spin up. SPUp.3ds and hit saved. And it's going to ask me, do you want to preserve the Max's texture coordinates? Okay. I'll tell it yes because I do want to keep that information. And I'm going to get an output window warning here that's letting me know that, hey, I've got a non-8.3 bitmap file name. In other words, the file name that I was using, buzz_texture, was longer than 8 characters, so it kind of shortened it up for me. It just truncated after text. So it's now buzz_text.bmp. But Logan, this has no effect on us, does it?
Absolutely no effect. It does not get the texture information out of the 3ds file. You do that yourself later.
Exactly. So I just wanted to walk through that just to show you the whole process. But now we're going to write this thing so that it does exactly the same thing, and then we're going to turn around and come back in here and make this script right here, or the new one that we create, even better by automating the inverse selection and even popping up the export window so the whole thing's just really streamlined. I mean, that would be the way to go.
Yeah, that sounds like a real exporter then.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead, and I can simply hit delete, chink. Now I'm back to my actual weapon that's animated. It looks nice and happy. And I'm going to keep this exporter up just so that I can refer back to it as I'm showing you what we're doing. But we're ready to get started with some MAXScript. What do you think? Ready to go?
Yep, sounds good.
I think what we're going to do is go ahead and take a quick break and save this section right here. So for you guys, it's going to be an instantaneous break. But we're expecting some people to come over in just a second, like my kids from school. And this could cause a little bit of a disruption because they're like, yeah, what a great day, and all this good stuff, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to pause for a minute, and we'll be right back, and then we'll start the actual MAXScript part. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and create our MAXScript. So we want to build this little guy down here. So the first thing we're probably going to need to do is have a UI maybe?
Yep.
And a UI for those of you guys out there, Logan, you're just so, yep. Yep. Now's your time. You're supposed to go, yep. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a user interface, this guy right here. So to do that, over here with MAXScript, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click New Script. Okay? Now, you guys that are used to working with 3ds Max, you know that these are rollouts. Okay, and this is a special rollout floater right here. So first thing we need to do is we need to actually create a rollout, and then we're going to take that rollout, we'll create a rollout floater, and we'll assign the rollout to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get busy. First of all, to lay out our rollout, I'm going to start out the whole script by typing rollout, and then I'm going to give it a name, anything I want. I'm going to call it RLL_EXPORT, and export will be the actual caption that you're going to see right here. Okay, so that's the text that shows up on the actual rollout. What do you think? Easy line so far?
Yep, pretty easy.
Angie, pretty good?
Yes, pretty easy.
Okay, so
question, but where does a window come from? I know you're getting to that. But.
Well, actually, believe it or not, you're not going to see the word window this time. All right, you'll see. I'm almost there. So I'll go ahead, and what I need to do is an open parentheses and a closing parentheses, and I'm going to block all of the code. Every single thing that I write that belongs to this rollout is going to go inside this open and closing parentheses right here. So all the button stuff, the events, everything's going to go inside there. Now, after that, on further down, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a rollout floater, and we're going to assign our rollout to that floater. Okay? So, and again, this is a rollout floater down here. So what I want to do is I'm going to start using comments. So dash means comments, and comments are something that it's ignored by MAXScript. It's only for the programmer. Notes, or someone who's going to come in behind you and read over your script and try to see what the heck it is that you're doing. By having good comments in place, it'll be real easy for them to figure out what's going on where. And as I go through this entire thing, I'm going to drop comments all over the place because I believe it'll be helpful in understanding what I'm doing if you do not have a real strong grasp of MAXScript. So dash, and let's say just create a new rollout floater. I don't know, that sounds like a pretty easy comment to me. So to do this, I'm going to say export floater. This is another name. This is going to be the name that I'm going to use. It's not really name. It's more of an object. The rollout's going to be, or the rollout floater is going to be assigned into this right here.
That's how you refer to it from code.
Exactly. So export floater equals, and then this is where I actually define it. So new rollout floater. And I need to give some sort of title for my little window here. So let's just call this thing UT space exporter. Notice how it's inside double quotes because it's just text. MAXScript doesn't care about it. You can have multiple spaces, the whole 9 yards in there. So export floater, and I'm going to give it a width and a height. So 200 pixels wide and 112 pixels high. So now if I go ahead and take this into a file and we'll save it. And let's go ahead and come all the way back down to lessons, lesson file, 3ds Max scripts. And let's just call this, we'll call it class script. Sounds good enough for you guys being part of a class right now. So I'll go ahead and save it. If I was to execute this right now, Logan, what would you think we would see?
I think you'd see a blank window with a blank rollout in it.
Okay. So we'll come up here and say File, Evaluate All, like I showed you earlier. That's like running it. And you're real close.
Kind of.
99% of the way there. We got a blank window. We got this guy down here, but we don't have the rollout in it. So even though up here we defined a rollout, we still got to turn around and do something else inside this window to put the rollout in here. Okay? So we'll do that next. And let's just go ahead and add some more comments. I'm going to say add the rollout you created above to the new floater. Pretty good comments. So we're going to use a built-in function inside of MAXScript called add rollout. And we need to give it the name RLL_EXPORT. Remember, we named the rollout above right here, so we got to refer to it by its name down here. So we're going to add the rollout RLL_export to EXPORT floater. Okay? And again, remember, export floater, this guy represents the actual floater rollout. So we're going to add this rollout to this floater. So now, if we run it, we should see exactly what you were describing a second ago.
Cool.
We now have an empty window with the exception of the export rollout in it. In the export rollout, you'll notice I can plus, minus, I can click on it to expand and collapse it. though there's just not much inside to see at the moment. So I guess we better go ahead and go in here and start adding a few things. So what we need to do is add what are called controls. Okay, controls are control elements. Basically, they're buttons, they're spinners, they're drop-down boxes, they're labels. They're anything that you actually physically see on the user interface. They don't necessarily need to be something that you can interact with, but it's something that you can see. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a couple things. As you see down here, we've got some text going across the top, we've got some spinners down here, and we've got a button. Okay, so let's go ahead and come back into our code. And at this point, we're done with everything that's taken place outside of the rollout. Now everything that we're going to do is going to exist inside the rollout, and then down here by simply adding the rollout to our floater, that's how we kind of bring it all together. So coming back up here into this area, I'm just going to hit Tab. I'm going to respect indenting a lot because it makes it real easy to see what belongs to what, and it'll be easier to tell you what I mean by this a little bit later. Hey, let's take a look at Angie. How are we doing?
Oh, pretty good.
Nothing too confusing yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. So let's go ahead and start out by making a label. That is the control type that will give us text. And I'm going to give it a name, LBL1. I could call it anything I want. Okay. I can't have spaces in there, though. And then, well, actually, with MAXScript, can you have spaces? Because with namings, yay, actually you can. There's something that you need to do with quotes and all that good stuff, and I don't want to get into that. So for this lesson, let's just say you can't have spaces, because you actually can. But LBL1, it's always a good idea to name your objects just in case you need to refer back to them. Even though we're not going to be referring back to our label right here, it still doesn't hurt to see this. So now I'm going to start the actual text. So I'm going to say start. And I'm going to put 10 spaces in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I'm going to do end. I'm going to do 10 more spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'm going to do copies. Okay?
So using a real technical method of lining those up.
So yeah, this is exactly a very technical method of aligning things. And when I execute the program now, woohoo, we have a floating window with a rollout that has got the word start, end, copies, and we know there just happens to be 10 spaces between these guys. Why? Because I put them there. Now, this is centered, and that is good. But you'll notice down here in the export, I've actually got it offset to the left a little bit, and I'm just using that just to show you how we can actually control the position of this guy as well. So if you want to in yours, go ahead and center it up. That's totally cool. This is just, again, for demonstration purposes. So I can come back up here to my label control, and I can add some more stuff to it, such as I want to say that it's position, POS, colon, open square bracket. It's going to be 16 pixels over and 13 pixels down. Okay, so again, let's come up here and evaluate. Now you'll notice it's no longer centered. It's shifted a little bit. And let's say if I came up here and said it's going to be 63 pixels down, what's going to happen?
It's just going to move down on the window.
Boom, hits way on down here. And now we actually have something to expand and collapse. If you see, not bad, huh? Okay, so let's go ahead and change this back, of course, because that's not what we're looking for. But what Logan was getting at a second ago, making the cute comment about my very technical way of spacing here, is we could have done these guys individually, and then just each label, each of the 3 labels, given it a position command to actually say this is where the start would be positioned, this is where end, this is where copies will be positioned. But in this particular case, the spacing worked well for me, and I'm being just slightly lazy. So the next thing that we have is we've got 3 spinners down here. So let's go ahead and add a single spinner. So spinner, I'm going to give it a name just like I did label, and I'm going to call it SP Start. By the way, an interesting note, MAXScript is not a case-sensitive language for any of you guys out there that are programmers in other languages like C or C++. But when you start dealing with directory paths, it actually gets case-sensitive. So that's very, very,
that's weird.
Very weird. But outside of that, it's not case-sensitive.
You can type spinner with a capital S, but you couldn't type a directory with the wrong case.
No, because then it would say that the directory wasn't found.
Okay.
Yeah, you can imagine how much that messed me up the first time I experienced. I was like, what is going on? The directory's right there. Okay, so we've given it a name. Now, I'm going to set the text of this guy to nothing. Let me show you what I mean by text. I'm going to call the text hi there as demonstration purposes. So I'm making a spinner. Its name is SP Start, and it's got the text hi there. So if I say file, evaluate all, hi there, and there's my spinner that's ready to rock and roll.
So it's kind of got its own little label built in.
You got it. It's got its own label system built in, if you will. So if I come up here and I leave this guy blank, like such, and execute it again, now it's just empty. I've got a few problems. This guy's way over to the side, and he's actually supposed to be right up underneath start. He's way too long, and check this out. I have decimal numbers that I can select for frames. Probably not a good thing. So let's go ahead and make sure we don't have too many of those open. We haven't been closing them. They're
history of everything we've done so far.
Ta-da! Okay, so spinner, nothing. So now let's go ahead and come in here, and we're going to do positioning again. So I'm going to say POS, and again, open square bracket. I want this one at 15, so I've got it 1 pixel further to the left than the text above. 29 down, space. And at this point, actually, before I put anything else in there, if I come in here and evaluate again, you'll see now that I've got it aligned up in the proper spot, but it's still too long, so you probably guessed it. I can come in here and use some sort of width command. So width, colon, and let's just make it, I don't know, 40 looks pretty good. So file, evaluate all, and we now have a spinner that's matching the spinner down here. What do you think? Pretty simple, huh, Logan?
Yep, definitely simple.
Okay, so let's go ahead and close that out, and at this point, oh yeah, we do have a problem, though. Man. I said it a second ago, but I'm about to move on. We have decimal, we have float numeric type that's being allowed in here, and we don't want that. So we can come back up here, and I can say set the type, colon, to pound integer, like such. So now if I come back up, evaluate it again, and start changing my numbers, you'll notice I cannot get any decimal-based numbers put in here. So that will definitely work since we're representing whole frame numbers down here. All right, so now let's get lazy. I'm going to highlight, Control-C, hit my down arrow, Control-VV. So now I've created 2 more spinners. And the next guy is going to be end, so SP end is what we'll call him. By the way, I'm using SP to stand for spinner, just in case you haven't figured that out. And the next one will be SP copy. Then let's go ahead and come over here and control their spacing. As far as their position down, they should be the same because we've got them in a row across from one another. So as far as up and down is concerned, that number should be the same. So we should leave 29, 29, 29 along as far as height positioning is concerned. But you'll notice that, of course, we're incrementing our width, or not width, but going left and right here. We're incrementing that for the other 2 spinners. So we'll go ahead and take that guy and we'll place him at 65, and we'll take the other guy and put him at 115. Now let me go ahead and say this real quick for those of you out there that are non-programmers looking at this starting to breathe really bad and sweat right now. You know, how did I come up with these numbers? I played with it. You know, I did 120, yeah, I didn't like it. I did 140, well, I really didn't like it. So I did 115, ooh, I kind of like that. So that's the number I went with. It's no big deal. Okay, so with this in place, now let's come back in here, evaluate again, and check this puppy out. So now we're starting to get the same thing here that we've got down here. Now, good, good, good. I'm totally digging it so far. So now let's go ahead and come down and add a button. That's the only element that we're missing left. So it's real simple, button. I need to give it a name, BTN export, BTN, of course, being for button, then export. And I'm going to put some text on the button. I could say anything that I want. I'm going to put export. Yeah, that's good enough. Export. And let's go ahead and position it. So POS, colon, and 11, comma, 57. And let's go ahead and give it a width of 153. So now let's go ahead and save and evaluate. So we've got this guy right here. We do have the ability to come in here and also do height as well. So thought you might like to see that. So if I said height, make it 65, that's a pretty tall button. So if I evaluate it, as you can see here, we have a pretty tall button. Nobody can miss that guy. Okay? There you go. But we don't want to leave it that big. We want to leave it looking something like that down there. So let's just change this to about a height of 19 pixels. And now if we come back up here and evaluate it, I would say that these 2 guys are pretty much looking dead on. What do y'all think?
Yep, that's it.
Looks good.
Okay. So now we've got that in place. We need to go ahead and do some error checking. Let's go ahead and, you know what, though? I'm just thinking. I'm going to change this up a little bit from the way I had it planned in my head, only because, and those of you guys that know me well, you know that when I teach, I change things on the fly constantly just to accommodate with the way the lecture's going. Hey, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. First of all, let me introduce you to something that I think you might find helpful if you're not a big MAXScript person. If you come up here and click on Help, second option down just happens to be called the MAXScript reference. That's interesting. If you click on that, you'll probably find lots of wonderful information about MAXScript. If you come over here, everything from introduction to what the hell it is to everything else in between. Sorry about that. Now I'll come back over here to index. If I wanted to find out everything about button, I could simply type in button. Oh, what do you know? There's a button. Double click. Button. The button item is used to place a press button on the rollout, blah, blah, blah. You can click it. Here is the syntax of it. Okay? The button, its name, a caption if you want to place a caption on there, any images if you want to place an image on it, which is cool, and tooltips as well if you hover your mouse over and you want a tooltip to pop up. So you got all sorts of stuff that you put in here. These square brackets, what are those, Logan?
See, those mean that the parameter is optional.
You got it.
You don't have to put that.
You don't have to put it there. So the only thing that you need here in this case is we need to give it a name. So come down here. Here they give you a very simple example. Button. Its name happens to be clone, and that button is going to display create clones. Okay? Now, go down a little bit further to events. You'll find that just about every control has got an event. Okay? An event means when something happens to that control, the event's going to get triggered. In this case, a button has a single event. It's called on pressed do. So on the button name, when it's pressed, do whatever type of code, whatever expression you give it. Okay, then it's going to actually do that. So I wanted you to see that just so you know how to get in here and find some information on it. But let's hook the button up real quick just because, again, I think it's valuable stuff. So let's just hit enter a couple of times to just jump on down. And I'm going to say on, remember it was on the button's name, press do. So on btn export. It looks funny. My spelling just died. And so on button export, pressed do. Now, since I'm going to put multiple lines of code in here, I'm going to open with the parentheses, and I'll go ahead and put my closing parentheses in here. And just to show that it's actually being triggered when you press the button, I'm going to put a piece of code in here called message box. This is something that's built in the MAXScript. And I'm going to say time to export. Simple enough. So now we've written this little program. So we've got a little UI. All of this stuff in here is being placed inside the rollout. Then we come down here and we simply create a floater window and we add our rollout to that floater window. So let's go ahead and evaluate. Same UI as we've got down here. When I hit the export button now, ding, we get time to export. So we get a little dialog box that pops up, feeds us information back. Up here we've got the word MAXScript, and you may not be too interested in having that. So we could say, we could come over here and add a little bit more information by adding a title. So I can say title, colon, and let's say the title is going to be, I don't know, what's a good title for something like this?
Error, warning. Yeah, warning. Warning's good.
Warning. But this isn't a warning.
Yeah, I know, but that's what's always used.
I know, but let's do getting started. Since this is what we're showing at the moment. We're going to actually take this out and put the real getting started code in here shortly. But if we evaluate again, export, getting started.
You want it to mean something.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Not like a normal warning box. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, this has really no meaning except for to show you that we did trigger it whenever we hit the button. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is going to become a little bit more technical. And then after I do this little more technical section, then I'm going to do a section that gets a lot more technical. What I want to do at the moment is create a function. A function is a series of tasks that get executed by calling a single name. So if I had a whole bunch of things that are all related to a single task, I could put all that code into this single function and call that one function name anytime I wanted to execute all of that code. Well, one of the important things that I'm going to need to do right off at the bat at the beginning here is I'm going to need to have some error checking. I need to make sure that you've got all of your stuff filled out properly or we're going to run into problems, and we don't want to run into problems. So to do this, I'm going to define a function. I could type the word function or I could just use FN for short. Now I need to give the function any name that I want. I'm going to call this function error test. Then you place an equals. Then you do an open parentheses and a closing parentheses, and everything from your function goes inside. Now, something interesting to note. Functions can return values back to the caller. Now, at this point, we're getting into a level of understanding that's kind of required. And if I don't really get real deep into this, some of you guys may end up being a little confused. Well, I'm not going to go real deep because we've already got a MAXScript. Actually, we've got several MAXScript VTMs planned in the future, and all of this will be broke down heavily. But I will try to be careful enough going through this that you'll get a general idea, and then if you rewatch it a couple of times and open up the help file at least once, I think you'll be able to follow along without any problem. So right now, we've just defined a basic task that I can call on to do something. A good example. If I could have a task called wash dishes, and of course wash dishes would mean put all of your dishes in the sink, turn your water on, put your soap in, wash the dishes, turn all this good stuff, right? Now I could simply look over at Angie and say, wash dishes. And see, since that is a task that's programmed, oh, she's going to kill me now. But since that's a task that she has memorized or programmed in, she gets up, goes in there, and washes dishes. Well, actually, she doesn't. She hits me over the head with something hard, but you get the idea. So we've created an error test, so I can simply down here call an error test. So to call an error test, it's just a matter of saying error test, open and closing parentheses like such. This is for any of you advanced programmers out there, or even intermediate or beginner programmers that have a basic understanding of procedures and functions. Logan, I'm just talking directly to you on this one. With functions with Max, if they do not accept arguments, you have to have an open and closing parentheses down here.
Pretty much any programming language does that. If you have a
not everyone.
Okay, well, the one I've been working with for the past year.
Okay. Maya, you can get away without doing that. And there's other languages that you can also get away without doing the open and closing parentheses.
I just always do it out of habit, so I thought you had to.
Oh, absolutely. No, I absolutely agree. I always do it, too, out of habit. But inside MAXScript, this is required. But since error test is actually going... Why did I take that out? Since error test is actually going to return something back, I want to come in here and do something a little more fancy. I want to do a test. I want to check to see if it returned back true, meaning yes, there was an error, or false, there was not an error, and we can continue with exporting stuff. So just by typing the word error test like this, we'll call this task to execute. And this area of code will kind of be put on hold for the moment until we return back from up here. Now I'm going to use if error test equals false. Then, open parentheses, bring that guy up, tab him over once, tab over, and close parentheses. So don't let all this freak you out. It's still just one little section. The way this works is if this guy right here evaluates to a true condition, then we're going to run what is inside here, period. Okay?
So if it evaluates to false? Equals false?
So if error test gets a false back, we're going to run what happens in here.
Okay.
So if it gets a true back, that means, yes, we did have an error, and we don't want to run in here because true is not equal to false. Now, for some of you guys out there that are new to working with programming, or this is the first time you've seen it, you're looking at this equals thinking, what does equals mean? Well, a regular equals, let's just come up here and type somewhere. If I said x equals 5, what this does is it takes 5 and puts it into x. Would you agree with that, Logan?
Yes.
It is an assignment operator. And we're not wanting to do an assignment here. We're wanting to do an equality test. So if we want to test if these two are equal, we need to do equal. Okay? In some languages, you've got to be real careful because it will let you use a single equal in an if statement, and it will come out true every time.
Right, because it's setting it.
Because it successfully sets it. Yes, absolutely. So what I want to do is I want to say if error test comes back, so this right here is going to get replaced with a true or false. If it matches false, we're going to run this. Let's go ahead and come up here and use some more if statements and see if we can kind of fancy this up a little bit so that it's a little easier to see what's going on. Let's go ahead and do the most obvious error check first. Let's see if anything is selected. So make sure at least 2 objects are selected. Because we need at least 2, right? If we only have 1, we're not going to have anybody to attach to, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't even be using the code. You get the point. So we need at least 2 objects. So we'll go ahead and jump over here, and I'm going to use another if statement. So if And now, you don't have to have open and closing parentheses around these, but you can add them if you want. And of course, I come from other programming languages where it just happens to be required. So I guess you're going to see me doing that a lot. I'm just letting you know that. So I'm going to come up here and say if, open parentheses, and I'm going to do selection.count. Selection.count holds a number that represents how many things are selected at the moment. Okay? So if selection.count is less than or equal to 1, then we need to do something. Open, close. Notice how I always make it a habit to put my open and close parentheses in there from the beginning. I do this every time I'm teaching somebody programming, and there may be a beginner in the room for the simple fact beginners do an open parentheses and they start coding, and they forget to put the closing parentheses.
And trust me, if you forget it, it's really, really hard to find the one you forgot.
If you have a lot of code, absolutely. And sometimes the errors or warnings that you're going to, well, not warnings, in this case it would be errors. The errors that you get don't always point to that being the exact problem, which makes it even more of an Easter egg hunt. Okay, so if our selection, again, selection is built, it's an object that's built into 3ds Max, and it has a property on it called count. And all this represents is all of the objects that are currently selected. So if I have less than 1 or less, I have a problem. So what I'm going to do is use message box again, and I'm simply going to say you must have a minimum of 2 objects selected. And I'm going to move this guy over a little bit so that I have room to type. There we go. So you must have 2 objects selected, period, end of quotes. Then I'm going to go ahead and say title, error. So now we're using Logan's error. Error in selection. You always want to kind of try to make the title something that's kind of a quick abbreviation of everything that's happening. So this lets me know there's a problem with my selection. Then I can read down for the details inside the actual dialog box. Now, here's where the magic of a function that returns a value back comes into place. Return true. Okay? This return true means if there's more code inside this function, who cares? Immediately jump out of my function and return back to whoever called it, giving this value. So in this case, if we get stuck into this area right here, true will be sent back and placed right here that's highlighted. So if true is equal to false, well, no, that's not true, so we're not going to do any exporting stuff. Okay? So all of our exporting stuff is going to happen inside this if statement. How are we doing so far, Angie?
Well, it's pretty good.
Not too, getting a little deep?
No, yeah, it's a little deeper, but yeah, I'm hanging in there.
Okay, her eyes are bulging a little, but they don't look too bad, so I think we can keep going.
I'm still breathing.
Okay, that's a good thing. So let's go ahead, for testing this, let's come down here just to see that it truly works and say return false. This just sets me up so that if my selection is greater than 1, it's going to skip over doing all this code, of course, because it's not going to evaluate to a true statement in here. So if it skips over this, I need to go ahead and return something back. So I'll return false back. So let's go ahead and evaluate. So file, evaluate all, export. You must have a minimum of 2 objects selected. Oh, man, who wrote this program? Let's go ahead and come over here, select a single object. There. Must have a minimum of 2 objects selected. Fine. There. Export. Ding. Time to export. Okay? So at this point, you see that we would actually get in and start executing the code that's going to be required to make it export. Pretty simple so far?
Yep.
What do you think, Logan? You're familiar with programming. How do you like the formatting so far?
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's pretty standard, I would for the most part. I mean, some statements are a little different and all, but I mean, for the most part, it's not bad. Kind of get a little VB feel in here. Now, MAXScript is true object-oriented, but anytime you do if, then, and else, then you start thinking VB. So let's go ahead and click OK on this guy here. So we see that we've got some stuff actually working, and I'm getting pretty happy with this. So what I want to do now is come down here and let's do some more if statements. So let's go ahead and skip over here. And how about this time we make sure that our parameters are set up properly. And when I say parameters are set up properly, I'm talking about our start, end, and copies. We don't want a situation like 0, 0, 0. Or we don't want 0 to 45 and 0. So to do that, I'll just simply come in here and say, again, I'm making comments, make sure the parameters are set up properly. And I'm going to do another if, but this if statement is going to become a little bit more tricky. I'm going to say if spend, remember that's my control up here, so I'm going to look at the value that's in spend. So if spend dot value is less than or equal to spstart dot value, or, so this is how you do booleans for those of you guys out there, and ors, etc. So or if spcopy dot value, if I could spell, equals 0, then, and I'll come back and explain this, open, close, hop back up and tab, message box, there is a problem with your start, end, or copies number. And let's go ahead and give it a title also. And this time we'll say that it's going to be an error in parameters. I don't know. What do you think? That makes sense?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, Logan's like, yeah, whatever. So now what this is getting at is if we're saying make 0 copies, it's not going to run. Or if my end value is less than or equal to my start value, that means that I have a larger start value, or they could both be at 0 or the same number, which then I would not have a predefined range to take snapshots from, which would be a bad thing. So if that happens to be the case, either of these two things, so if this is true, or, and you could also use the word and for different types of testing situations, or this is true, then we're going to give this message box and we're going to return true. Yep, we had a problem. Okay, so now let's go ahead and come down here and do our next piece. So make sure they, being the users, are not trying to create too many copies, because you don't want to have 20 frames and someone say, make me 55 copies. That would be retarded or not good. So let's go ahead and say if spcopy.value is greater than, so if the number of copies is greater than spend.value minus spstart.value, then open parentheses, close parentheses, message box. So you cannot create more copies than your selected frame range. I don't know, that sounds pretty good. Let's give it a title. So the title is going to be error in copies.
The copier is just broken.
So far, do you see any problems with anything that I've typed so far?
Nope, all looks good.
Angie, look good to you?
Yeah, that looks fine.
We're doing a series of 3 tests. This last one, to go over it real quick, if my value, so if I happen to put, let's say I put 5 over here, and I'm going to do a test from 0 to 4. So if my copy, which happens to be 5, so I'll just type a 5 under here to remind you, is greater than, let's put the greater than over here, my end value, which is 4, minus 0, so 4 minus 0 is 4. So is 5 greater than 4? The answer is yes. If the answer is yes, then you might as well say it's true. Yes means true, no means false. So yes, this is true. So we're going to do message box cannot create more, blah, blah, blah. Ooh, and there is a problem with this. Return true. So we're going to break back out and we'll return true back to the guy. And yep, we definitely have a problem. So with all this, let's go in here and do a little testing now. So we'll save, file, evaluate all. Just kind of move this guy down at the moment. We'll move him up over here and deselect everything, test. Yep, we know that's bad. We know it's still bad. We select 2 things. Then we come in here, export. Error in parameters. There is a problem with your start, end, or copies number. Well, yep, that's a fact. So let's go ahead and come in here and say, I want 5 copies, and I want 6. Or excuse me, I want to go from 0 to frame 5, and I want 6 copies. Export. Error in copies. You cannot create more copies than your selected frame range. Man, all right, take it back to 5. So now 0 to 5, this means I want to take a snapshotted every frame, export, timed export. So, what do you think?
So now all the error checking is in place.
So we've got error checking in place, and we're now ready to bump up the intensity yet one more notch and actually start putting the coding in. The coding that's going to be required to do all the stuff.
That was the easy stuff, huh?
Yeah, that's the easy stuff.
Oh, yay.
Hang on, let me look at you. Eyes bulging a little bloodshot. No, I think you can make it. You're doing all right. So let's go ahead and scroll down. So now everything that's going to happen is going to happen inside this button pressed, because basically when you press the button, we did the error check, everything's cool. So now we're going to make sure everything happens inside here. And at this point, we're actually not going to come and do a lot of testing because, well, we'll just see, because we basically need to get the heart of the engine written right here. So first thing I always tell students about, and I hope I've really pushed that in this particular lesson, is that you must understand exactly what it is you're trying to create before you start creating it in the world of programming. It's not like drawing where you can get a pencil and a piece of paper and you sit down and you start sketching something out, and then stop sketching something out, and then after 10 minutes you go, ooh, that looks like an eagle, and you sketch out an eagle. No. You don't just start writing code down and after 10 minutes come up with an idea. You know ahead of time what it is you're going for. So in this case right here, we know what we're doing, but I'm going to help make it just a little bit more pronounced by coming in here and saying, all right, listen up. This is exactly what we need to do in English. So I'm doing a comment. So simple overview. Let me just write it. Simple overview of the steps required by this script for our final outcome. First, we need to make a copy. We'll just say copy all of the objects. We need to make a copy of them all. The next thing we need to do, attach all of the copied objects together. And then finally, something else I'm just going to throw at you real quick at the very end. For those of you 3D people out there, you're familiar with normals. Every surface, every piece of geometry or polygon has a normal side. That's the side that's facing out, or you could also refer to it as the true side. If we have flipped normals, and that can happen from time to time, flipped normals will cause us a problem when we take it into Unreal. Would you agree, Mr. Logan?
Yep, I could see that being a problem.
And actually, we have seen that being a problem with faces doing the flicker thing.
Oh, is that the problem?
Yeah, that's one of the problems we've run into. So to fix that, what we're going to do is we need to unify all of the normals so that they all face basically all the same common direction, which means we'll make sure that we don't have any problems there. Now, this is in very basic English. Now, I'm going to make it a whole lot worse for you by breaking it down into very advanced code. Actually, it's not advanced code at all. If you just really relax and just kind of follow along, have a good time, I think you'll see that it makes sense. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some local variables that's going to be used in the scope of this section of code right here. So I'm just defining a variable as nothing but a little container that'll hold information. I don't want to get into a huge lecture on variables. That's all. It's a little container, hold information. So I'm going to say local I, comma, obj, step value, my array, and holder. Those are going to be some variables that I'm going to be using throughout this. Now, you'll find that MAXScript is not really picky when you're dealing with variables. First of all, you'll notice that for those of you that are familiar with other languages, generally you do things like int space I, or if you're in Object Pascal, it would be I space int. You kind of reverse it there. But anyways, here we're not defining a data type. Now later on, there will be places where I'm going to say as object or as string or as float, and at that point, I'm specifying a specific type of data that's going to be stored in that variable. Now underneath that, I'm going to go ahead and initialize a few of these variables. You're going to see that I'm going to use I in a minute, so I'm going to say I equals 0. Not I minus 0, but I equals 0. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to initialize my array and holder. The reason I named them my array and holder as opposed to some sort of technical, technique-style variable name, which you'll usually see if you go to the bookstore and open up any book on programming, it just scares people half to death. Just because I want to show you that these things can be anything you want them to be as far as the name is concerned. I could have called this
Selection array.
She was just pointing at me that I should not say anything. Yeah, I could have called it selection array or something like that. I'm just teasing Angie over here. But what I want to do is I want to set these as an empty array. So I'm going to say my array equals pound open close. And if I was going to put things in the array, I could actually put them inside the open and closing parentheses. But we're going to fill these arrays later on. An array, real quick, is a special type of variable that will hold, it holds multiple elements. So if you have a regular integer, and an integer variable will hold a whole number, 1, 2, 3, 29, whatever. If you had an array of integer type, then you can hold a whole slew of them. Basically, you can think of a single suitcase. Open it up, it's one compartment, holds something. Or you can think of a tackle box for fishing. Tackle box for fishing is like a suitcase in a way, except when you open it up, it has all these compartments in it, right? What do you think, Logan? Does that work for?
That's a pretty good visual.
Pretty quick analogy, I guess. So that's basically like an array. So we're going to do my array. Holder is also going to be used as well as an array. So we'll go ahead and say that it's an empty array. Now, we've got our variables in place. Let's get busy with doing the stuff. First thing, when the MAXScript runs, my viewport will update. One of the things I need to do before I copy this thing, as you saw earlier in this lesson, I need to advance my time slider first, which means you will actually see all of this stuff occurring. Okay, so basically you'll see it advance, you'll see it all select, you'll see it all get copied, you'll see it all get attached, then it'll advance again, it'll all get copied, it'll all get attached. And with all of this stuff happening real quickly on your screen, because of MAXScript and Max trying to redraw the screen, things start to get very, very slow. Okay, so to get around that little problem, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my screen redraw so I don't have to worry about that. So I'll do that by simply saying, disable scene redraw. Okay? And that will turn off having my screen redraw. And then later on, before the very end of all of this stuff, I need to make sure that I have an enable scene redraw. Because you can get in trouble if you don't turn this thing back on. Now, let me give you some quick demonstrations if you don't mind. Let's go ahead and save this thing in case we cause anything to crash, though I doubt that'll be the case here. I'll go ahead and copy disable. I'm going to come down here, right-click, and open up my listener window. And let's just go ahead and clear everything down here. Paste this. Now, watch this. Middle-click dragging. It's moving around without a problem. Here I go. Execute. Mouse is now back over my viewport back here. Middle-click. Dragging, nothing happening because the viewport has been disabled. No redrawing will occur. Now I'll come back down here. If you want to do a mean trick to your buddy, if you're a college student, just walk, when he goes out to get a soda or something, just walk up and do that and then leave. You'll see him reboot his computer. I guarantee you.
So evil.
Now I'm going to come up here, sorry. And actually, you know what? We won't do that there. I don't know why I did that. I guess I'm just thinking about the evil days I've gone through. So enable a scene redraw. Let's go to the end. I'll simply click OK. I'll come up here, middle click, and now you can see that I have re-enabled. So if you disable it, run into a problem of code in here, you could simply copy code and paste it up here. Okay? So moving right along. Let's go ahead and close that out. So now let's put our code in between these guys. The next thing that I want us to go ahead and do is I want us to go through every object that's currently selected. So we should have all of our guns selected. I want to step through every object and rename it to something predictable that I can grab at any time if I want to, as opposed to leaving the name the way it is. This isn't something that I necessarily have to do. I could code it to where it doesn't work this way. But it's, again, this is just something nice to show you guys. So if you're new to working with MAXScript, you're learning more as we speak. So I'm going to do this by creating a loop. So I'm going to do for obj, for object, in selection do. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take the first object that's in my selection of objects, drop it in here, and then I'm going to come down here. Let's block it in with open and closing parentheses. I'm going to do something with it. When I get down to here, I'm going to check. The for statement checks for me. Is there any more objects after that first one in here? If the answer is yes, then I'm going to take the second object out of here. place it in here, perform any code on it. When I get down to here, I'm going to ask, is there a third object? And I just continued this. It's called a loop. So now let's go ahead, set this up. Let's go ahead first and do a little bit of some comments in here. Just trying to keep this thing clean and professional. So let's say go through, and where am I? Oh, THROUGH. Go through every object selected and rename it to the name. No, let's just rename it to, let's change this up a little bit. Let's just rename it to master obj, so it's our master object, plus whatever number is currently in I, no, not O, I, sorry, I'm looking up, down, all around. Remember I up here when we put 0? We're going to start using this in a minute. So whatever number is in I, and then add to the end of that, let's pick something wild and crazy that's never been seen before, Z00. That looks good enough. I'm picking some sort of wild selection, and I'm ending it with 00. And then when we go in there and we start making copies, we'll get 01, 02, etc. Because 00, if you shift select that, you get 01. Okay? So with that in place, watch how easy this is. I plus equals 1. I'm pausing right now because I'm looking at Angie, and she's like, what are you writing? Well, I plus equal 1 is the lazy way of saying I equals I plus 1. Okay? So in other words, at this point right here, I have simply taken what is in I, which is currently 0, and I have incremented it to 1. Now, I could have put a 1 up here and put this after the command I'm going to do next. It's all personal preference. Okay? So in the next line, I want to simply say obj, referring to the object, dot name. Okay, now I'm referring to his name property, equals master obj plus I as a string. Remember I told you earlier we were going to actually refer to a specific data type in a few places. This is one of them. Plus Z00. All right. So all this is going to do, this plus, since we're dealing with strings here, what are strings, Mr. Buzz? Well, strings are nothing but alphanumeric text that's in between these quotes that mean absolutely nothing, for the most part, to MAXScript. It's just text that you can use. We can use it for names. You can use it for whatever. So anyways, I'm getting a concatenation going on by plussing here. Using the pluses, all that is appending this to the end. So what this ends up looking like would be master obj 1 Z00. Okay? Because right now I contains a 1. But you believe that's all I need to write right there for this section to work?
Yeah.
Because I grabbed the first object out, put it over here, I increment this from 0 to a 1. I come down here and say that object, the first object, his name is equal to master object 1 Z00. Do I have any more objects? Yes, I do. Grab the second object out, place it in object. Increment I to 2. Then I come down here and say the second object's name is master object 2 Z00. Kind of see how that works?
Kind of.
Really?
Yeah.
No, you don't.
A little.
Okay, I'll keep going. I get you. All right, so that's in place, and I'm happy with it. Now, the next thing we're going to do is going to get a little bit worse. I need to find a step value. Remember, we created a step value variable up here. The step value, let me see if I can find a real easy way to explain this. Even though I say, let's do a quick example right here, 0, 20, and I want to do 10 copies. Even though I'm going to go from 0 to 20 and I want to produce 10 different copies, the 10 copies doesn't mean that I'm going to produce one at every frame. So I need to, we're going to start out, we'll take a snapshot of the first one, and then I need to know how to evenly space 10 out throughout the frame range of 0 to 20 so that the 10 is just evenly spaced apart. Does that sound good, Logan?
Right, you need to find, like, make a copy every what frame? So every 3 frames, every 5 frames, it needs to figure that out first.
Exactly. That's a beautiful job. And we're going to store that in a variable called the step value. So let's come back up here, and let's calculate it. So to get the step value, just relax on this. You just might have to rewatch this a couple of times if this gives you a hard time. In fact, let's first do a little bit of comments just because it's a good idea. So find the step value for each frame that will have a snapshot taken. Okay? if I can spell taken right, we'll be in good shape. So to do this, I'm going to say step value equals. This is an assignment statement, just like I showed you above. This is also an assignment statement where you take whatever's on the right and you put it into the left. So in this case, what are we going to put on the right? Step value equals, open parentheses, SP end value minus SP start value, that's dot value, divided by SP copy dot value minus 1 as float. Okay? So what this will do is this will go in there, and I guess you could say this this basically finds our entire range. Logan, can you explain it?
Yeah, that would. At first, it finds how many frames you're going to be working with. What's the range? And then you need to find. Let's see. You need to find how many copies you're going to make over that range and divide it by that.
Yeah,
number.
basically. Now, we subtract 1 to it because if we don't subtract 1, from your start to your end range, you'll always end up with 1 copy more. So by subtracting 1 from it, you set yourself up so that you will get the right amount of spacing. There's one other thing we'll need to do a little bit later on, but basically this will fix that problem. So just finds out our, you could almost say, normalized range. This divides into it to find out the percentage as far as spacing is concerned. Once all of this is resolved, the answer is sent back over here into step value. And so now let's go ahead and move down to the next thing that we're going to do. This is going to seem kind of strange, but promise you it'll make sense. I'm going to put my entire selection in a single variable. Okay? I'm going to put it into an array. So check this guy out. I'm going to say, let's do some comments first. Put all of the objects, these are my master objects, into holder as a collection for easy selection each time we loop below. Because it's now for us, it's time for us now, since we've got everything set up, to start going through here, setting our time slider to the right place, making sure all of our master objects are selected, and then taking a snapshot of all the objects and then putting them all together. Okay? So, and just, I know this gets a little confusing, so just bear with me right here. So to do this part right here, to put all of the selected objects, all my master objects into holder, all I need to do is say holder equals for object in selection, collect the objects. Okay, and you can read about for in and collect inside the help file. What this will do is basically just walk through every object that's in the selection and place it in holder so that I could easily grab everything in there by just simply saying select holder. It's a collection of objects. Okay, so let's go ahead and start a loop now, and let's start walking through this thing.
So you can do stuff to holder, and then that gets done to every object that's
every
in
object
holder?
that's in there. You got it. So I'm going to say for I in SP start dot value to SP end dot value. So with this for statement here, we are with another loop, just like we've been seeing loops all along. This loop right here will walk through every single frame starting from the start to the end. So this will walk through 21 frames. Zero's also a frame, okay? So we do have the ability to put what is called a step value in, or we can say by. So if I say by, now we'll use our step value do, which is just that. It's a step value. So this will take us from, in this case down here, 0 to 20, but it's going to be by every other so many, okay, based on whatever you got returned back into step value. So, and again, you can see by is just part of, it's built into the regular for thing. You see all the things that are built in are in blue here. All right, so now let's go ahead and show what's going to happen inside this for thing. First thing I want to do is select all of the original objects. But Buzz, all of the original objects are selected right now. Well, you know what? That won't cause any problem. It'll just select them again. But in a few minutes, we're going to start attaching and doing things with our copied objects, which means these guys are not selected. And when we loop back up in our for statement, it would always be nice for the very first thing that happens is a selection of all of the master objects. So I'll simply say select holder. Okay? Now I'm going to come down and I'm going to set my time slider down here to wherever I is at the moment. Okay? So let's again do some comments. So set the time slider to I. And it's real easy. It's another built-in thing inside of MAXScript. Slider time equals I. Oh, that's tough. So if slider time was 10, this would go, well, wouldn't do that. It would go, bink, we're now at 10. Okay? So all we're doing right now is saying we're going to go through this loop, looping from the start to the end by a particular step value. And each time we go through here, whatever number we decide we need to be at, we're simply going to set our time slider to that particular frame. Anything you want to add to this, Logan?
No, that's simple enough.
Okay. Just want to make sure I'm not getting too confusing for anybody out there. Angie, how are we doing?
I'm hanging in there.
Okay. She's not too pale, but she's getting pale. So now that we've got that, the next thing I want to do, this is an important one. I'm going to check to see. Let me write this out first. I'll kind of talk with it, then I'll re-explain it. So check to see if the next frame we are going to sample or copy from, or whatever you want, I like to call it sample, is past our range, which would be SP end. If it is, then we need to set the time slider to the SP end value. Yeah, that's right. There you go. In other words, we got to start and a stop value. Our step value could be so big. What happens if, let's say that we got to do 20 copies and we're at frame 19 and our step value is 3. The next time we come through here, I is going to be set above 20, which means we're going to jump out of the for loop and we'll never get to the very last frame. We need to always make sure that we copy the first one and the very last one. In other words, we need to copy what is at SP start and what is at SP end, and then we need to kind of average out the frames in between and copy from there. Right now, if we do not have this little special piece of code I'm going to add in here next, if we're at frame 19 and we come back up and I gets incremented to 21, then SP value to SP end will already be past SP end, so that's going to jump us out, and we don't want that. Is this, Logan?
Right. It would. It's only the for loop is only going to go up to what the end frame you type in.
Right.
So if if adding the step value to it goes over that end, you're not ever going to hit a value in the loop. The loop will never go that far.
Right. So this right here, it's going to make sure that we do get this last value in case we ever run into that situation. And it's really easy. All we need to do is just another simple if statement. So we're going to say if the slider time plus my step value is greater than or equal to my SP end value, then we'll just simply say slider time is equal to SP end dot value. Okay? So in other words, wherever I'm at right now, let's say I'm at 19. So if 19 plus step value, let's say it was 3, that gives us 20, 19, 20, 21, 22, gives us 22. So if 22 is greater than or equal to my end value, which is 20, which it is, then instead of sampling at frame 19, let's just simply take our time slider and move it to that very last section. Logan, make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So this is just a little safety precaution for us so that we know we get this very last frame. So let's just go ahead after that and come down here now and start taking a snapshot of every object that's inside the selection of objects. Because right now, remember, we have a mass of objects selected, several of them. So to do this, let's go add some more comments. So loop through each object and take a snapshot. You can use copy, by the way, instead of snapshot, but we found that copy sometimes gives us weird results with our pivot points for some unsolvable reason. So we decided to use snapshot, and that works well. So now I'm just going to say store the new objects in an array, because we're going to need to come back and address these guys. So to do this, I'm going to do another loop inside this for. But you know what? Yeah, we'll just go ahead and do this here. For object, for obj in selection, do. So in other words, this is going to walk through every object again and take that object out and put it into obj. So we'll come in here, and I'm just going to say new obj equals snapshot obj. Append to my array new obj. So remember, right now, let's say back here, our gun, we've got 6 items selected. See, 2 deflector shields, 2 on the other side, so that's 4. The barrel's 5, the main gun's 6. We've got 6 objects selected. So that means we're going to go through this loop 6 times, pulling each object out one by one, putting them in OBJ. Then we'll come down here and we're going to take a snapshot of OBJ. So this returns us a copy. And it puts that snapshot into new object. Now we take new object and we simply append it to my array. If you remember, my array was defined up here. It's empty, but now we're starting to stick stuff in it. So in a minute we can come back to my array and work with that for attaching all of these objects that we've cloned together. Okay? Logan, so far so good?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing I want to do, let's go ahead and come down and say loop through all the new objects. It's time to put them together.
So now you're going to loop through my array.
You got it. Through my array. See in the array. Starting, now here's the trick. Add the second object and attach them to the first object in the array. Remember earlier, when we were attaching all of the pieces of our gun, we always selected a master object or main object. And then we attached everybody to it, and remember that's who we inherited the animation from and all that good stuff. Same situation right here. We need to make sure that we simply select the master object and then we attach everybody to them. Okay? Now, to do that, all I need to do is use my little array and pick one of the guys in the array to address as he's going to be my master. And in this case, we're going to use the first element. And then, so we're going to loop through starting at the second element on forward and everything in there attached to the first object. So to do this, I'm just going to simply do another for. I'm going to say for I goes from 2 to my array dot count. Do. Open, close parentheses. Okay? So now we're going to walk through the second cloned object, the third cloned object, the fourth, the fifth, and then the sixth. Now let's put some more comments in here. Attach the object in the array to the first object in the array. That doesn't sound confusing enough. So let's just do it. Mesh op, a mesh operation, dot attach. Now we just need to simply give it the 2 objects that are going to attach. My array sub 1. That's how you talk to a specific object or element inside the array. So sub 1, we want to attach to him my array sub I. Remember, I is going to start at 2. Since we got 6 objects selected, it's going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to take whatever object was put in there for number 1. We'll take 2 and attach to number 1. We'll take 3 and attach to number 1. We'll take 4 and attach to number 1. 5 and 6 and attach to number 1. So you get the idea. Now I'm going to add just a little piece of extra code here at the end. Attach mat colon pound ID to mat. This is matching material IDs to materials. This is in case you decide to do a really complex gun that uses multi-sub-object material types. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just relax and don't worry about it. But if you've got multi-sub-object material types and you go to attach multiple objects together, what this will do is it will match the IDs from the objects being attached to the materials and IDs of the other objects, so that you should keep everything, for the most part, in sync as far as textures are concerned. So with that, that's it. Basically, we'll just go through this little loop right here until it's done. And once it's done, let's just unify our normals real quick. So we'll do another mesh op. So mesh op dot unify normals my array number 1 pound all. What this does, by the time we get out of this, we have attached every single thing, every single cloned object together into a single object. Okay? Now all we're going to do is unify the normals. Once we unify the normals, this is just going to make sure that they're all pointing outwards for us and that everything's good. And once we've done that, let's clear our array out again so that we don't run into any problems with any data being left behind, since remember, we're in a big master loop. So now we'll just simply come down here and say my array equals pound open close, and that just cleared it out for us. Tell you a secret. I'm done with the whole program. Doesn't look that way, but I am. We can add some more stuff in here in just a minute. Angie's over there going, thank heaven.
That's not as long as I thought it'd be, actually.
And I'm going to add a couple more things that could make it a little nicer for us. But this right here is it. Very end of this, the heart of it lies all, if you think about it, inside this one for statement. From there down to there. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, I'd come back to the indenting. You'll see when I do indenting, it's very easy to see all this indenting stuff. I can simply follow it all the way back up and see who it belongs to visually really fast. See this indented stuff? Follow it back up to the guy that's not indented right before it starts, and that's who he belongs to. Very helpful in visually making your code more appealing to read visually. Okay? So now, let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. All we're doing every time is we make copies and attach them is we're selecting all objects, putting our time slider at the right spot, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it is we're going to put it at. Make sure that we're not going to accidentally go over next time around, and if we are, set it to the last one. That's a little precaution in there. Then we simply go in there, and we take a snapshot of every single object that's selected. Once we've got a snapshot, so at this point we now have a duplicate of all objects. So instead of 6 objects, our scene now has 12 objects. Then we simply come down here, and we walk through all of those new objects and attach all of them to the first copied object. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 get attached to number 1. So now they're all attached to number 1 as one object. We unify those. We clear the array. We come back and reselect all of our master objects again. Set our time slider over to the next area. And we just keep looping. Logan, what do you think?
Yep, it's pretty simple.
I would say not bad at all. So with this, let's go ahead and do a file save. And in case, by any chance, any of you guys happen to see any errors as I was typing?
None in the code.
Okay, because usually I make errors all over the place when I'm talking and typing at the same time. So let's go ahead and evaluate it. So it's now run. I've got everybody selected. Let's do a section that'll be easy to deal with. We'll just do spin up again. From 0 to frame 20. Give me 10 copies out. Export. Boom. Time slider just went. That's nice.
Sweet.
And if we come into select by name, look at that. I now have, remember my master object is selected. But I have objects 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I now have a sequence of frames or animation cycle that I'm ready to export out. So I need to, every time I'll need to do an invert, select, file, export selected, and then I could call this spinup.3ds. Yes, I want to replace that. Yes, I want to preserve the textures. And yes, I know you just changed the bitmap, but I could care less. Then I need to come back over here, and I need to hit delete, and then I'm ready to start again, running the script on the next sequence. But you see, Logan, that's a pain, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm having to invert selection. If I forget to do that, that's death. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
If you forget to invert your selection, export all that out. It's because exporting is an export fine.
Oh, yeah.
And we bring that into Unreal. What kind of things can we expect to see?
First, it probably won't import because it doesn't like sequences starting with 0. And if it did import, you'd have a single frame.
Or if you managed to get multiple things in there that had multiple objects that were named properly in there, you'll get a explosive mesh look. Remember that?
Oh, is that where that comes from, too?
Like when the spline got copied in there also. And yeah, so there are, like for the most part, yeah, you should have errors when you go to export, period. 3DS to UNR is going to go, But if stuff gets through the door, which I have seen happen, then you get a very interesting look when you get inside. It does not look like a gun. When you hit fire, it looks like a grenade went off. So let's make this a little bit more streamlined for us. And I'm going to show you some very beginner stuff. Instead of using complex code, I'm just going to do some basic copy and pasting to do everything for me. The first thing, if you don't accidentally select everything, you'll go through all these warnings and all. So we could take the whole warning problem out and make it auto-select everything for us if we wanted to. So I'm just going to fancy things up at this point, then we'll be completely wrapped up. So if I wanted to, I could quickly come up here to my selection area. I'm going to comment all of this out. Okay, so that's all commented out. Now I'm going to come down here, and I want to do a select all. So watch how I'm going to cheat down here. Let's open up my listener, edit, let's clear it all. Nothing selected. I'm going to come up to Edit, Select All. There's an action man.execute action, and there's a number in here. And this just happens to refer to an action that, when executed, selects all. So let's see, a good place to put that piece of code. So I'm just going to simply highlight and copy. Would be, let's see, we'll come over here, disable screen draw. Right after we disable it, we can select everything. What do you think, Logan? That's not a good place?
Sure. Because then it doesn't have to draw all the selection boxes and stuff.
So select all objects. Okay, so that's going to select all my objects for me. Then let's see. What would be the next thing we need? An invert selection?
Probably after, yeah, that's the next thing that you have to do.
So down
by
here,
hand.
before we re-enable the screen, we need an invert selection. So we can probably come up here and say, let's grab 2 of these guys and cheat here. I'm going to go, I'm going to, with 2 objects selected, I'll come up to Edit. I'll come down and say Select Invert. Or, of course, you guys also saw I could come in here and I could say Invert and Select. Okay? But in this case, though, be careful. I'm going to come up here to Edit and select Invert, like such. Say a different code number. That's the one that I want right there. So I'll grab this guy right here, copy it. So before we re-enable our screen, I will go ahead and invert my selection. And again, notice how I'm real good about constantly putting comments down. Invert selection. And then I want my export dialog box to come up automatically because I'm lazy. I'm not really lazy. I always tease about that. But I'm trying to make this more professional by automating everything for you. So to do that, we'll just simply come up here, File, Export Selected. Oh, gee, thank you very much for that guy down there. Let's go borrow him from over here. So we'll highlight, Control-C to copy, come up here, paste, and again, I'll simply export selection, like such. Turn, scene, redraw, back on. Let's see how this guy works. Let's go ahead and save it. Let's get rid of our old stuff. Let's go ahead and get rid of our listener. Scroll back up here. Let's see, any problems? We have the section that's checking for us to see if our objects are or are not selected, so I'm not seeing any problems here. So let me just rerun it. Let's go ahead and minimize this. Nothing at all is selected. And as long as everything runs fine, I'm ready to actually start doing the real sequence of stuff being sent out. Everybody's already seen that from 0 to 20, we're going to send out 10 is going to be our spin up. So let's go ahead and hit export. Whoop. Hey, like that.
Nice. It's like what you'd expect from an export button.
Exactly. And even though you can't see it because we don't have any redraw stuff going on right now, up here we get multi-selected and we don't see any keys down here, so we know we've got the right stuff. So I'll simply come up here and say this is my spin up and hit save. And it says, do you want to replace it? Yes. Notice, look, redraw still not turned on. Yes, I want to preserve. Redraw is just turned back on, and then I've got this guy going on right here. I'll just simply go ahead and hit close. Okay? Now, redraw has been turned back on. We got the warning. We see everything selected. So technically, we want this to be a little bit cleaner, don't we?
I guess.
Well, how about auto-deleting all that stuff?
Oh, yeah, cleaning the scene back up.
Who wants to go in there and have to do anything like that? First, let me come up here and select this. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's why I didn't put the delete in there right away. I wanted to verify that the code did indeed work without a problem. And it did. So we'll open up our good friend again, the good old listener. I'll come up to Edit, hit Delete. Thank you so kindly. I'll simply borrow some code right here. I'll come back down here to my code, class script. Scroll back down to all this stuff that we've written over the last hour or so. And down into, so after we do the export, by the way, the code will freeze until we get back.
I noticed that. It was waiting on the export dialog to finish.
Absolutely. So after it gets done with that, then we'll come back down here and we'll say we're going to delete all of the attached objects. And we'll paste that in there. And I'm going to turn my screen redraw. I'm going to cut that. And let's see, after we do input selection right before the export, I'm going to turn it back on only because then your viewport would look a little bit more natural like other tools that you're used to using inside of Max. Instead of your viewport not redrawing or updating if you move the dialog box around. So with that, let's go ahead and save one last time, close, and re-evaluate all. I'll minimize this guy because this time we should be home free. All right, so now we've done 0 to 20. Let's keep on going and do the rest of them. The next one I want to do, now this is where I'm getting for real. I want to do 21 to 30, okay? And I want to do 5 copies in this area right here. And if you remember, 21 to 30, this is our actual alt-fire sequence right there, okay? It doesn't matter where I put my timeline. You remember the slider time equals I is going to place it in the right spot. So 21 to 30 by frames or by copies number 5. Hit export. Vroom, everything's automatic. The redraw is now back on so it looks normal for us. I can come up here and move this around, okay, so we don't see any big blank areas suddenly. And then I can just simply name this guy for me. Let's call him A Fire, and 3DS will be appended automatically. So I'll save that out. Yes, I want to preserve. Click close. It's all cleaned. I can just keep on going. So now I'm going to come up. Now you're watching me use my tool quickly. I want to export out from 30 to 49, and I want to do 10 frames in this section right here. And if you remember, from 31 to 49, remember how we stopped at 49 all the way back in the animation section? That's where everything's all back together because 50 starts our actual fire. So this is our spin down right here. Okay, it's 31, 49 by copies 10. So export, zoom, done. We simply come over here. SPDN is what I'm going to call it, .3ds. Save. Okie dokie. Yep. All delete it. Ready to go with the next group. So now for the next one, let's do from 50 to 60. And from 50 to 60, I just only want to do 5. That'll work. This is our fire sequence. Export. Boom. And let's go ahead and move that so it'll update. There you go. You can see the fire sequence is in place. And so we can simply come down here and we'll call this one fire.3ds. Select, preserve, close, all cleaned up automatically. You just got to love it. Now I'm going to come up here and say from range 61 to 70, again, only making 5 copies. This is going to be, if you remember, this is our actual gun select. Okay, so 61 to 70. So we'll export. Boom. Let's call it select. Okay, there we just got our update back there. You can see all the different copies. It's kind of, well, that's up. That's okay. It's going to delete it as soon as I get it out of the way anyways. But you get the idea of what's happening. So select, save, okay, close, and we're ready for the very last one, which is going to be, let's go from 70 to 80. This is putting the weapon away, which is this guy right here. And let's, for this one right here, what I want to do is just kind of move him over so that you're going to be able to see it a little bit better as to what's happening.
So you say 10 copies if you have more movement, and 5 if there's a lot
Well,
less movement?
well, if you watch my ranges over here, I'm going from 10 to 80. I'm basically getting every other frame with everything I've done.
Oh, okay.
So that's only 10 frames, so I want 5 copies. When I was doing the bigger ones earlier, I was going from 0 to 20. It's basically 20 frames, so I said give me 10 copies.
Okay.
So I'm just taking every other one. You could do more if you wanted to. You could do less if you wanted to. It works fine.
So that way, if you play the animations by default, the speeds will match because you've proportionally exported a number of copies.
Exactly. So the last one, 70 to 80 with 5 of them, export, and let's update that. So there you can see guns coming up in the hand, and we'll go ahead and call this guy down.3ds as well, save, and we'll tell it preserve textures, okay, and done.
It's important to name select and down. They have to be named exactly that because that's what Unreal will be expecting.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that more when we get into the next sections. So, guys, this is it. I hope you've enjoyed this section. I know a lot of people are not big scripting buffs, but, man, understanding scripting can make things a whole lot more powerful. Logan, do you think I went over it okay enough for people to get a decent grasp?
Yeah, this should work.
Okay, good deal. So with this section being complete, and this is what hopefully you've written, I will try to include this for download. If I don't, just bug me and I'll put it up. It's no big deal. And that will conclude the sections. Thank you guys, Angie and Mr. Logan, both y'all for helping me out getting through this thing.
No problem.
And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we've got a quick update for you. We have just discovered that while our script is laid out perfectly and there's no flaws in the script itself, we actually have a flaw in the files that are being exported. And before you move on to the next lesson, we need to fix that first. If you remember, by using our script right now, everything is being named. Let's go ahead and just kind of scroll down in our script, or scroll up. Yeah, we're down there at the bottom already. Thank you. And everything is being named master obj plus a number plus Z00. Well, just came to my attention of all of these years of using 3ds Max files, I've never had an object exported that had a large number of characters in its name. So this just caught me off surprise, and instead of just sweeping it under the rug, I thought it would be nice to come back and say, hello, we need to come in here and make a small adjustment. 3ds Max files only allow for 10 characters, and let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and come up over here, File, and let's just do a reset. Reset that for now, File, and let's do an import. And we'll just grab down. Here's all those 3ds animation sequences that we just sent out just a few minutes ago. So I'll go ahead and hit down. I'll open it up. Yeah, we'll bring this on in. No, we don't want to match the animation length. So there's a sequence for the gun going down. Now what I want to do is I want to show you what our names look like. So I'll go ahead and come up here to select by name and take a look at this. Master OBJ 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Not what we're looking for, is it, Logan?
No. We specifically named them 01, 02, 03. And it just so happens that 3ds files can only hold 10 characters in their names. So it conveniently chopped the characters down and didn't warn us.
Strangely enough, it didn't just chop it down. It also kind of did some renumbering for us over here as well. I mean, it did have the 1, 2, 3, 4 up over here. So, yeah. Anyways, it was trying to be kind and helpful and give us proper names. But the problem is, in this very next lesson, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using 3ds to UNR. It's a utility that allows us to basically get everything into Unreal. And when we go over there and use that utility and run it, and it takes a look at these sequence files, we're going to have a bit of a problem, wouldn't you say, Logan?
Right. Sequence must start with... It looks like 3ds UNR kind of took the object 1 and whatnot, but still, it's for it to work perfectly, we need 01, 02, so on.
Exactly. And right now, what's going to happen is it'll say imported 1, 2, 3, 4 objects, and it's going to give you a warning because one of them starts with 0, and it's not looking for that. So we need to fix this. And what I'm going to do real quick is just go back into the script. And then once we get back into the script, I'm just going to take out this OBJ part and just let the master object be called master. So that's going to give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters, 7, 8 with the 0, 1. But right now we've got the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's, again, taking care of everything else, gotten it out of there for us, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to go ahead and come in here, cancel, and we'll just simply come down here, reopen our file. And to make that change real quick, coming back into our code, I'll just simply come back down to the 4-object and selection area where we renamed all of our original object parts. And master OBJ, it's as simple as going back into your script, guys, and doing that. Okay? So now this has been updated where it'll work fine. Yes, no, maybe? Or are we looking at another problem? If we just leave it like this, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The number will be 7, 8, 9, 10. You see a problem with it, Logan?
No, that should work.
So with that, you know what we could do is go ahead and just test one real quick. Yeah, I agree. It should absolutely work. We'll go ahead and come up here and save this with our changes now and evaluate our code. And then you remember we've got all of the new little modifications in here to make it all streamlined, so we don't really need to worry about selecting anything. So I'll just simply go ahead and say I want to go from 0 to 20. Let's grab our spin up real quick. And let's grab, 10 copies. And we'll go ahead and tell it to export. It'll take care of it for us. And a little movement so we get an update over here. We're going to do, in this case, it was our spin up. Yes, I want to replace it. Preserve textures. Yeah, we know about all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and reset. The reason I keep resetting is just to keep my scene nice and clean when I import this guy in instead of the gun being over the other one. And we'll come in here, grab spin up. Yep, nope. And there it is. Let's come into select by name. And now we see a sequence of 01, 02, 03, 04, and this will definitely work much better.
Yes,
okay?
Definitely.
So, and I don't foresee anybody having 100 frames when bringing in an animation. Whew, that would be pretty
100 frames per sequence. You could have over 100 frames if you had individual 3ds files.
Yeah, but that'd be pretty messy if you were actually rendering out one sequence. You hit a button and your gun like completely built itself with 115 different frames. Ugh, that'd be a lot to deal with. But we could do it.
Yep, you could.
You know.
Make your gun jump out of your hands and fly around in the air, but...
Getting ideas. Just kidding. Okay, so now that you see that this is definitely giving us a naming convention that's going to work just fine, what we'll do is go ahead and move on into the next lesson. Make sure you make that update to your script. Everything will be nice and cool. So with that, that will truly end this lesson. I am, by the way, once I go off camera right now, I'm going to re-export out all of my files so that the files I'll be bringing over for the conversion process are absolutely A-OK. So with that, thanks a lot, guys.